Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Margaret, aka Pink Pops. Today we're going to be talking about usability testing plans. You probably shouldn't push forward with a design before testing it. And you can't test it without a clear plan of action. A usability plan is an outline that helps provide structure to your tests so you can get the most value out of your time with participants. It also helps align your stakeholders with what you're testing and why, so they can sign off on it and get excited about seeing the results. All right, enough chit chat. Let's dive right in. First off, what are you hoping to achieve by conducting these tests? These are different from the actual questions you'll be asking users, in that it's a more high-level way of identifying what your business goals are and what you hope to understand about your users' behaviors. For example, maybe your goal is to identify the happy path that users take to locate a resource within your website. Or it could be discovering how users like to browse for products on an e-commerce app. Setting these business objectives help you decide what tasks to test and which potential follow-up questions you might want to add. Remember those science fair projects where you had to put together a trifold and include what your hypothesis is? Well, here you're kind of doing the same, without the cardboard. You're predicting user behavior and seeing whether or not you end up being correct. You might wonder, what's the point of this? Can't I just test and know for sure? Why assume? Well, hopefully before you come up with your assumptions, they're rooted in prior research you've done, analytics data you may already have on your users, persona you've established, or any other information that help guide your design. We're not just pulling guesses out of a hat, after all. For example, maybe you've previously observed your users preferring to use filters on other e-commerce websites rather than go directly to the search bar. And as a result, your hypothesis may be that users prefer to browse instead of search when shopping. It's important to keep in mind that during the test, you're not leading the user down the path that you had assumed they would naturally take on their own. You'll likely continue iterating on your design as you test more often. Maybe in this test, you find out that users prefer to browse, but in the next one, you might find out how they like to browse, and then maybe even later on, what specific filters they expect to see. It's okay to be proven wrong in your assumptions. It just helps steer you closer to the right direction each time. You may be using paper prototypes, low fidelity, high fidelity, or even actual programmed prototypes. Deciding which one really depends on your situation. For example, how early on are you testing? Maybe you just want to put out a feeler for some of your initial ideas before you pour more effort into refining the design. You might consider testing at a lower fidelity first if that's the case. Or let's say your company already has a well-established design system. I can put together high fidelity prototypes fairly quickly if I'm using reusable components that I had created. In this way, it's kind of like picking up a UI kit online, except it's branded and I actually designed it. It could depend on who you're testing with as well, and how easy it might be for you to get access to your actual users. It's good to test quickly and test often, but some users might be confused interacting with really rough and early sketches if it looks far too removed from the actual product. Even with a high fidelity prototype, participants who haven't had prior testing experience might still take a while to grasp just the concept of a prototype, where functionality is limited. Some users are tougher to schedule time with, such as doctors and executives. So if you want to get interactions that are closer to what they would expect to see in the end, I would say go with a higher fidelity prototype. Before you meet with anyone, make sure you test your own prototype first. You might find broken connection links, and you don't want those to derail your results. Your usability tests can be moderated or unmoderated. There are tools online that let you just send a link to users and it tracks their answers or clicks. As a result, you can probably reach out to a larger sample size, since you don't have to schedule any time to meet them face-to-face. But you also can intervene when a user struggles with a task to understand why it is that they're struggling. Many times you can only deduce based on these click trackers why someone might have been mashing on a button that took them to the wrong page. Moderated tests, on the other hand, can be either remote or in person, but it gives you a chance to ask follow-up questions on the spot and react in real time to a user's behaviors. Which users you test with depends on your persona. Is this a feature for a specific segment of your audience? You may want to narrow your criteria. Diversity in behavior from your pool of candidates can be helpful in identifying edge cases in your product, but sometimes if everyone is too unique from one another, it may be more difficult to test for commonalities that can ultimately help refine your design. For example, if you have 10 different people who each say something totally different from one another, you'll find it tough to draw conclusions on your typical user. Nielsen-Norman recommends testing with 5 users at a time, which is usually my go-to number, but your situation might call for a larger sample. Maybe you have a way bigger audience, like Instagram, and 5 people just aren't going to cut it and be enough to satisfy your stakeholders. Just know that the more people you test, the more time you'll need to spend synthesizing your results afterwards. All right, you've been given a budget. How do you plan on recruiting these participants? Maybe you already have a bunch of actual users that you can reach out to at a moment's notice, or maybe you're using a third-party tool to help you find these people. I'll do a separate detailed video on recruiting users, especially for remote testing, so stay tuned for that. But for now, think about where those users might be lurking. For moderated usability tests, a script helps you prepare the participant and give them an overview of your study so they don't go blindly attacking your prototype with zero context. You don't have to stick to it word for word. Once you've done enough tests, you'll probably have this part pretty much memorized anyway. To begin, I like to give an introduction of who I am and what I do, so they have a better idea of who they'll be spending the next half hour or so with. Then I give a brief rundown of what we're going to be doing today. Maybe it's testing a new feature on our mobile app, and I like to see them react to some screens. I explain that we're working with a prototype and what that means. Not everything is going to be clickable, especially if it's a low fidelity sketch, in which case you might just tell them to point at the items that they expect to click on as if it were a real screen. You'll also want to encourage your participants to think out loud as they're interacting with your prototype, so you know exactly why they're clicking here or there. If they're sitting in silence, the best you can do is guess, which kind of makes the moderated part of this test pretty much useless. Remind your users that they're not the ones being tested, the design is. They shouldn't have to feel hesitant to give the wrong answers, because there's no such thing. My general rule of thumb is don't test too many tasks at once. Usually I go with about 2 or 3 so that our users don't feel exhausted or try to rush through the last task. I also include some follow-up questions for each task to delve deeper into the why of our participants' behaviors. You'll have to wing it sometimes though, because a user might end up doing something completely unexpected. Just stay curious and open-minded, and definitely try not to lead them to answering questions a specific way. So, for example, instead of asking users, "Did you find it really easy to pay your bill?" consider, "What did you think about the bill paying experience?" I conclude the task by asking users if they have anything else they want to share, whether it's related to the tasks that we went over today or to the product in general. Sometimes these are where the gold nuggets can really be found. Because if a user loves or hates a part of your product, this is their chance to let you know, and they will. Since they're already right here in front of you, might as well collect some extra data points instead of just reading an App Store review, right? Completion and error-free rates are pretty standard success metrics for our tests. Most of the time, users are able to complete the tasks unless there's a serious design flaw that prevents them from reaching that goal. If that happens too often, sometimes a designer or researcher might actually consider pulling the test, fixing the issue where the users are getting stuck, and then retesting. This way, the user isn't blocked from the rest of the test, which we still have no data on. I generally go for a 100% completion rate though, since this doesn't happen too often. Error-free rates, I aim for about 80%, but again, it's up to you. It's not out of the ordinary for participants to stumble a bit and maybe misclick somewhere before they finish the task. But do pay extra attention to where they might be misclicking and follow up with questions so you understand why they took another route. And it's okay if your completion or error-free rates are estimates or if they're lower than what you expected. That just means that there are areas of improvement and you can always test again to see if those rates increase in the next round. I hope this helps give you a better idea of why putting together a user testing plan is important. I usually start noticing patterns after the first 2 or 3 users, and the nerd inside me is always excited about these things, even if it indicates that I probably should have designed it differently. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do so and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any future design content. As always, if you have any questions about the topic, feel free to leave it in the comments below. Until next time, bye!